Climate change is continuing its advance. Sea levels are set to rise further. How can we respond?
We need space for water, space for people, and building on water, building beyond the waterfront is a very logical step.
Are floating cities one possible answer to the challenges of climate change?
Technically, you can do a lot. We have platforms here sometimes that survive hurricanes.
Climate-friendly and resource-efficient. Is living on water a viable solution? Many people dream of living by the water, and most big cities are located on the coast or by rivers. But the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says the world must brace itself for a 1 to 2 metre rise in sea levels by the year 2100. Yet our cities continue to expand. Could we soon be living on the water? It's an idea that architects have been pursuing for decades.
Big architects have played with this theme, but I think the changes now that you go from dream to reality is because of the necessity. Because now with the whole urbanization, with climate change, we really need new solutions.
Koen Oldhaus has committed himself to realizing this vision and has designed over 300 floating buildings following the example of this hotel from the 1980s. But the idea of a floating neighborhood as an extension of an existing city has yet to really catch on.
And we see water as the ideal location where we can grow our cities and make it more safe, but also cheaper to build. If you have to protect your city with all these big walls for maybe 10 or 15 extra meters in the next 100 years, then it's better to already build on top of the water, because that's safer and you can just move up and down with it.
Without coastal defences, 1/3 of the Netherlands would be underwater. But it's a complex feat. The huge Maesland Barrier protects the Rotterdam region from storm surges. Each gate is equivalent to the Eiffel Tower in terms of weight and size. And Germany too has been steadily raising the height of levees over the last few decades. The danger doesn't just come from the sea, but rivers too.
It's not just only about space or the fact that you can go up and down with the water and safe, but it's also the flexibility. We really think that our society is changing so rapidly. Political changes, technical changes, and a city has to act to the new situation. But cities are very slow. If you build a building, it stays for 50 years or 70 years, and you can't change it. But on water, we can react very, very fast.
Oldhaus and his team have designed the world's first floating city in the Maldives. 5,000 detached homes for 20,000 people, interconnected via roads, canals and bridges.
The ideal situation is that we can just float them out, rotate them, and as a boat take them out to the main docks and change them and bring them back.
Maintenance is more challenging than it would be on land. The bridges will probably need to be repaired every 20 years. But replacing them is not easy, as the city's utilities are interconnected and run beneath the roads, bridges and houses. The houses float on pontoons that go down about 1.2 meters into the sea.
The price itself of a house, to construct a house, is maybe a little bit more expensive than building on land, because you have your floating foundation. But if you talk about the development cost of these kind of structures, it's less, because the price of water, the price of land below water, is of course less than land in the middle of the city. So the total development can be much more affordable than building on land. And that's necessary, because we don't want to build only for the rich. If you really want to solve problems in cities, same as in Male, you have to build affordable housing.
The capital of the Maldives, Male. With its population of 250,000 people spread across just 8 square kilometers, it's bursting at the seams. It's not unusual for a family of 10 to share a 2-room apartment. The tropical heat is hard to bear without air conditioning. But Male continues to draw people from the smaller, more remote outlying islands as it offers better healthcare, education and job opportunities.
I think Maldives feels the environment impact most from the world. And we've seen a tsunami, and we've seen this sea level rise every day. And there's a need for us to expand the population in the small islands. So people started believing or wanting to see an alternative for reclamation or more safer way of expanding life on the sea in the Maldives. So we believe this is the right time. It will be viable and also practical.
15 minutes away from the capital by boat, a private company called Dutch Docklands is building the floating city in a 200-hectare lagoon of a coral reef. The first 4 homes have just been completed. With a price tag of €250,000 for a house with an area of 220 square meters of floor space, they're also an option for the island's middle classes. Concealed underneath the wooden houses, there is modern technology, such as a grey-water recycling plant for watering the trees. Only time will tell how the sensitive ecosystem of the coral reef responds to the house's mooring, the traffic and altered currents. Those involved say the city will be environmentally friendly and climate neutral.
This is exactly how it looked like. We have single-story or two-story houses. We have sand on the street. We will generate electricity from solar or other turbines under the sea, and we will use the seawater to cool systems.
Water drawn from the deep sea with a temperature of 7 degrees Celsius is fed through the walls. By removing the necessity for air conditioning, energy consumption can be reduced by 60%. Wind and wave power cover the other energy needs.
This city has everything a city has, like football grounds, mosques, offices, everything. That's how when our parents lived, we could go fishing, we could jump into the water when we want, we don't need to taxi to see the sea, all that kind of thing. So this is more like a village, but used building modern technology.
A beautiful high-tech floating city that responds to the challenges of climate change. A seemingly seductive vision. Sasha and Jan felt the city centre was just too crowded. They wanted their son to be able to play alone outdoors. All the neighbours traditionally go for a New Year's swim together. It's like a village in the middle of the city. A strong community feeling has grown up over the years in Steiger Island. The houses and jetties rise and fall with the water levels. The lower floors largely already lie below the waterline.
So it's a concrete box which is lifted partly with a floating plastic cubes, and they put them under to level it. Because one of the things that you have is that if I have more stuff than my neighbor, the house is like this. That's one of the reasons I think why we also have a lot of contact with the neighbors, is just to discuss things. Because if you put a piano there, then they have a problem. So. Well, a problem, but then at least,
something's rolling.
You have something to discuss on the barbecue.
Beautiful ice. Yay!
The water quality is good, the fish are happy swimming between the houses. But in strong winds, the floating homes start to rock. Their centre of gravity is too high, something architects today would plan with greater stability.
If you see how big the forces are on these houses, that's quite extreme. And in all honesty, I sometimes wonder how long this house actually will be here. This house is 10 years old. I'm not sure if it will get to 100, to be honest.
These powerful forces have already caused cracking. Floating homes require more maintenance than those on dry land, hence their modular construction, where components can be more easily replaced, recycled or repaired. How safe is it living on the water? At the Maritime Research Institute in the Netherlands, scientists can simulate extreme weather conditions, using wind and wave generators to see what floating solar panels or floating cities can withstand. Olaf Vals knows how much can be done to adapt structures to rough conditions on the open sea.
I believe that from what we know from the offshore development, that you can do a lot, technically speaking. Like we have platforms here sometimes that survive hurricanes. So we make in this basin the wind and the waves and the current associated to a hurricane event. And then we look at the survivability of such a platform. Technically, you can do a lot. You have to discuss what do you accept as a cost.
Models of floating islands are also tested here. The homes, represented here by blocks, have to stay stable in the water to prevent their inhabitants getting seasick.
You need to find either a flexible connection, then you allow for some motion in a big storm. That helps in a big storm, that you have a little bit of flexibility to reduce the forces inside the island. But if you connect them rigidly, then it becomes one big pontoon. And then it starts to move less. And that can be also beneficial, but at the cost of larger forces inside the island.
This floating solar power facility could make an important contribution to energy production in the future for floating cities as well. The solar panel is in full scale, 25 meters wide and 7 meters high, big enough to let waves through underneath. The idea is for them to be located between offshore wind turbines in the North Sea, where conditions would be a real challenge for a floating city.
If you do this in the North Sea, for example, then the forces are still very large. If you do it with mooring chains, you need a lot of mooring chains to really fix the island. And we look into hybrid combinations. So you can make, for example, in the North Sea is not as deep, so you can do a reef, artificial reef, which is basically sand and stones which are mounted to the seabed, and they protect from the largest waves.
Right now, it would still be very expensive to anchor floating islands in the North Sea without a barrier. Floating neighbourhoods are likewise easier to set up in protected waters, but the development of flexible infrastructure is surging ahead. South Korea has plans to build an airport spanning the land and sea.
We should not wait too long with the research, because it also takes time. Like all the big infrastructural developments in the Netherlands have taken about 40-50 years to build. And a lot of research was done before they were actually built. The time is now if we want to have the solutions by the year 2100.
Germany still tends to stick to traditional floodwater defence strategies, raising levees and building flood walls. But in Hamburg, that means the River Elbe has become increasingly constrained, in particular by measures taken after the 1962 storm surge. With the difference in water level between high and low tide already more than doubling, the risk of flooding is growing. And more residential developments involving land reclamation are being created from the IJmeer Lake by Amsterdam. Instead of opting for floating flexibility, Germany and the Netherlands continue to bank on stability. Meanwhile, on the Maldives, the coral reef by the capital continues to be filled with sand. Hulu Male is one of the world's biggest construction projects designed to combat climate change and create living space. Alongside the 24-story skyscrapers, there is also a charming residential neighbourhood. The artificial island lies 2 meters above sea level and has been dubbed the Island of Hope by local inhabitants. 80% of the Maldives is not even 1 meter above sea level.
Today,
while the corals are dying in part because of piped waste, the construction sediment is also depriving the corals of air. Former school director Ahmed Saeed no longer recognizes the reefs of his childhood. Reefs that are also the nursery and the feeding ground for numerous fish species.
This is all dead coral here. And it used to be a thriving coral formations around here, and all this has died now. Okay, there will be coral bleaching, there would have been, but largely due to the dredging, especially I believe the second phase, where the dredging must have not been very controlled. In any case, all this area had lots of live fish, live coral, but it's all dead now.
75% of all Maldivian coral reefs are already dead. Extreme heat is mainly responsible, but land reclamation projects have also led to coral deaths. Saeed says that the archipelago's inhabitants have not been sufficiently informed about the impact. Planners say that floating cities are a gentler intervention in this fragile ecosystem. Time is running out here. The first talks were held with the government in 2008, but the floating city pilot project continues to face delays.
The floating village would definitely be, right now, the best solution that we would have. We wouldn't want monstrosities like that, where we have you will probably very soon hear about lots of social evils and lots of things happen when people are congested into high-rise places. We've seen that happening in other countries.
Germany isn't facing such drastic challenges as the Maldives, but population growth in the cities is causing housing problems. No floating districts are on the agenda yet, however.
Does it really make sense to create new city neighborhoods on a big scale on the sea or on the rivers? Wouldn't it be better to reconsider all kinds of land use? We could flood certain areas protected by levees and create floating greenhouses there. And think about how to organize high-yield market gardening, rather than saying we'll keep that as it is and expand out to the river too.
Flooded zones could be used for growing food, and not just for human habitation. Or the seas on our doorsteps could help feed floating or conventional cities. Locally based marine aquaculture could help preserve overfished stocks in the wild. Biologist Martina Mühl and her colleagues from the Kiel seafood farm are researching how to create a sustainable circular economy.
If we think ahead into the future and imagine that we will be living on and increasingly with water and operating aquaculture directly on our doorsteps, then I could imagine that we could raise fish. But then we would also have to grow seaweed to make it circular. But we're talking about big quantities. If we produce 1 ton of fish at one spot, then we'd have to produce 7 tons of mussels at another, and algae species too, in order to remove the nutrients created by the feeding and the excrement of the fish. That would make it circular.
One pilot project here involves the growing and processing of seaweed. The sugar kelp does not just help to improve the Baltic's water quality, it's also rich in proteins, and demand from the food industry is growing.
Seaweed is very healthy. You can call it a staple food. It has a lot of vitamins, minerals, fiber. It can be eaten raw or boiled or fried. I'll just wash it a bit. And then I'm going to eat it. It's like a tasty, crisp lettuce. A bit salty, but very tasty.
Once seeded, the seaweed grows on its own. The mussel farm also benefits the Baltic because the mussels remove excess nutrients from the seawater.
The mussels don't need feed or fertilizer. They slurp down whatever's in the Baltic like a cocktail. They practically eat as they breathe. One single mussel filters about 2 to 3 liters an hour.
But it needs 6,000 mussel farms like this one to filter out all the fertilizer runoff washed into the sea by rivers along Schleswig-Holstein's Baltic coastline. And that is hardly practicable. Closed-circuit systems like this shrimp farm are different. Its autonomous feed supply does not pollute the environment. The shrimps swim in water taken from the Baltic Sea, which is heated up with energy produced by a sewage plant. In a research project, the used water is so well purified in plant beds that it can be fed back into the Baltic without causing any pollution.
One advantage of this system is that it isn't just the water that circulates, but also the nutrients. It doesn't matter if you're in floating cities or in the desert. What's important is that you can create new human habitats with this kind of technology.
The island capital of the Maldives is not self-sufficient. Male imports almost everything, including most of its fruit and vegetables. A floating city would be just the same in this respect. Locals live from fishing and tourism, sectors that depend on healthy reefs, which are being destroyed by land reclamation and climate change. Floating cities could be one answer. Across the world, there are people searching for creative solutions to the dangers posed by climate change, for ways of living more sustainably. Soon we will see what floating cities have to offer on this front. The Maldives, with its fragile ecosystems, could be leading the way.